As we announced the last time, tonight we're going to be getting into Revelation 1 in the text within itself. And again, I will repeat, the way I'm going to be dealing with this is more, I guess, like a class situation than what you might say would be a sermon. You might say, well, you don't know what the difference is between them, and I don't either, except having a class situation gives you a little more latitude and leeway and a little more informality, and means that when we get, when the time's up, well, I'll stop wherever it is where that time is up, because we don't have to get to a certain place. All right, I'll not repeat the things that I just got through saying there, but we want to say here now in the book of Revelation, as we began, chapter 1, we find that the purpose is to instill confidence in the saints. That really is what it is for. It is a confidence booster. It is to build up confidence. Now, there are no new doctrines in this book. So don't start looking anywhere in there and say, now, I wonder what we're going to learn that we haven't known before. What kind of a doctrine of how to worship, of what you do. You're not going to find any of that in the book of Revelation. The theme of the book is victory of Christ over Satan. It's going to be talking about a war, and there's going to be the victory of Christ over Satan, as is stated really in Romans the 8th chapter in verse 37, when he says, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And so it's going to give us the absolute assurance that God's people will be conquerors. Now at this time, unlike it is today, at this time, in that particular culture, Christianity was seen as a suspect religion. They looked at it, that Christians worshiped a condemned criminal, that Jesus was condemned by the Jews, Jesus was condemned by the Romans, and here it is, this odd religion, these people calling themselves Christians, they actually worship a condemned criminal. And then many of them thought that the Christians actually ate and drank the blood and flesh at the Lord's Supper. And so there was a lot of concern about that, and then Christians refused to Caesar worship. Now, to you and me, this is nothing. But to stop to think about what it would be in that society, everybody in society except the Jews rendered worship to Caesar. It was just something that everybody did. It's like paying income taxes. Everybody did that, but here the Christians now at this time will not, and so people were looking on them in this way. Now, the book of Revelation is going to be broken into two sections. The first 11 chapters is man's view of this battle. In the last section, it's God's view of this battle. So we're going to get, in the first 11 chapters, we're going to get a viewpoint from man's viewpoint of what is really taking place. In the last section, we'll turn it around, and from God's viewpoint, we will see the same story of what is really taking place in here. Now, as we come to this last book in the Bible, it is time to prove whether all of God's prophecies will be true. Now, I want you to listen very carefully in the next 2 or 3 charts that I'm going to say. We've already covered them, but I want to repeat it because this is a foundation that we really need to understand in order to understand some of the things that are in the book. Now, God has prophesied, and God has given us promises all the way through the Old Testament. The Messiah would come and establish his kingdom, and nothing could stop him. God made man those promises. Now, the resurrection proved that to be true. Jesus Christ did come. The Roman government and the Jewish nation combined their forces to try to destroy the Messiah. They even killed him. They put him on the cross. But yet he raised from the dead, and God's prophecies are true that the Messiah could not be destroyed. But now, the same thing is true with the kingdom. He also prophesied that his kingdom would stand forever, and nothing could ever destroy it. Now, victory over the Roman Empire would prove this to be true. That's what this book is going to be about. It's going to give us a projection to see how God's kingdom goes to war against the Roman government. Of course, the king of the Roman government is Caesar. the king of God's kingdom is Jesus Christ. So it's Jesus Christ versus Caesar, or it's his kingdom, God's kingdom, versus the Roman kingdom. And so there's going to be a battle that's in there. Now, as we look at it, the Gospels was the answer to this. We're given the Gospels. We find that Jesus did raise from the dead, and God's promise is true there. Now, the book of Revelation is dealing with this, and it's showing us that this is going to be true. Let's look at what we've already learned back in Daniel. As we look back there, remember that statue, and we're going to go through them very rapidly because we've gone through them over and over and over again. And here's this little stone that's cut out, and it came down and crushed into that feet of that statue that's down there. And we learned that that statue was representative of the 4 world governments. So the stone comes down and crashes into that. And in Daniel 2:44, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, and it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So let us note 3 things in that prophecy. God gave his people 3 things. He said during the days of the Roman government, God would set up his kingdom and it would never be destroyed. That's number 1. Then in the same verse he says, but it will break in pieces and consume all of these kingdoms. Now all of these kingdoms were already in the Roman kingdom. If you remember, the Babylonian kingdom was consumed into the Medo-Persian kingdom. The Medo-Persian then was conquered by the Grecians, and it was absorbed by the Grecian kingdoms. And then the Romans came along, and they absorbed all of these in there. So what was the Roman kingdom? The Roman kingdom really was a composite. It was a whole of all of these kingdoms that had been conquered before that. All right, now the kingdom of God is coming, and it's just going to start out as a little rock. And the little rock is going to roll down the hill, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's going to hit the Roman government. And then all of those kingdoms will be crushed. They'll all be destroyed, and then the kingdom of God will stand forever. So now that's what Daniel prophesied. The question is that true? Is that true? That's what the book of Revelation is going to be dealing with. Then we saw that not only Daniel 2 taught this, but Daniel 7 taught it. And there we have it. Instead of having a statue, we had all of those animals, and each animal represented each one of these particular kingdoms here. And then we learned in Daniel 7, it said, these great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. So there's your 4 kings again, the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, Grecian, and Rome. So they all represent this. And then it says, but the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Now I want to make a point on that. And that is that here you find Daniel saying that in these animals there was going to be a great war. And in this war, the church, the kingdom of God, the saints, were going to be persecuted. They were going to just be trampled underfoot. It appears from, as you read it, as you see it, that God's kingdom wouldn't have a chance of coming through this still intact. And it would not have. The Roman government would have totally squashed it out. The Roman government would totally have dissolved it, had it not been for one thing. I want you to stop to think. That would not be a hard job to do. It's just like, how hard would it be if the government of the United States decided today to destroy the church? And so they call in all their tanks, all their army, and command, and I want you to go kill every Christian. Who could win the battle? Why, there wouldn't be any battle to it. They would just annihilate us. Well, that's the way it was with the Roman government. The church didn't have a chance of winning the battle against the Roman government until one thing happened. Now notice what the one thing is. Down here it says, the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and shall possess the kingdom and shall possess it forever and ever. Now let's read the next verses and we'll see what it is. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. So Daniel says that the Roman government would be persecuting the saints, the Roman government would be winning the battle, the Roman government would be tearing up the kingdom would not have not even a ghost of a chance of being, the church wouldn't have a ghost of a chance of standing intact until God intervened. The Ancient of Days made a decision. He gave his judgment. He says the kingdom is going to win. And so God gave his judgment, and it says, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. So the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. I want to talk about that a minute because I think that is a very meaningful verse, at least to me. Now, what does it mean, the saints possess the kingdom? Well, Daniel prophesied that the kingdom would never be destroyed. Jesus says the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it, that we're going to have it. But are we really going to have it? Are we really going to have it? Suppose that somebody came up here and they gave me this, and this is worth $1 million, let's suppose. And they gave it to me and said, Lowell, this will belong to you forever. So I take it, so it's mine, and now it will belong to me forever. Now I want to ask you a question. Just because somebody gave me this $1 million check and said it's mine forever, does that mean that I really possess it? Is it really mine? Let's suppose that Rod jumps up right now, hits me over the head, knocks me down, takes this, sticks it in his pocket, and says, Denise, let's go home. And away they go. Well, now, somebody just gave me this check. This check is mine. I was promised I would have it forever. But who has it? See? Rod has it. See? Rod has it. Well, what's going to have to happen? The thing that's going to have to happen is that this guy that gave me this check, he goes out in the parking lot, and as Rod starts driving down the road, he walks up and tips his car over, reaches in and pulls Rod out through the window, turns him upside down and shakes him, and this falls out. He picks it up, brings it in, gives it to me, and said, Lowell, there it is. You won't have any more trouble with Rod. I'm giving you this, and I'll protect you, and nobody is going to take it away from you. Well, now I've got a little confidence. If he's strong enough to do that to Rod, think what he's going to do when Harry tries to take it away from me, see? And so I could say, now I possess the $1 million. All right, God gave the kingdom to us on the day of Pentecost. But did we really possess it? Would it be forever? God said it would. Jesus said it would. But would it be? Because here is this great big force of the Roman government that's coming up in contrast to it, that is going to try to destroy it. So who will win? When you look at it, there's no question who will win. Rome will win. But Daniel said that is true until God gave this particular judgment. So let's keep this in mind as we go through it. Here's a way we might look at it also again. Homer Haley puts it, he said, now the grand theme of Revelation is that the war and conflict between good and evil resulting in victory for the righteous and defeat for the wicked. The verb, polemeo, which is the verb there, it means to make war or to fight, is found 6 times in Revelation, only once elsewhere in the New Testament. And the noun is found 9 times in this one book, 9 times elsewhere. He said, while Satan uses the Roman government, along with false religions and immorality, God uses Christ in his great battle. It is a war to the death. For one, it will be eternal victory, to the other, eternal death. That's what this is all going to be about. It's going to be about victory. The Greek word for victory, overcome, conquer, is used 17 times in there, that you're going to conquer. It's between, over here, Jesus Christ and Satan. And they're both after the kingdom. They're both after the church. Jesus Christ is asking us to put our faith in him. Satan over here is going to try to destroy us through Rome. He's going to use power. He's going to use false religion. He's going to use immorality. He's going to use everything that a government can use to try to destroy this kingdom. But just like God gave a promise that the Messiah couldn't be destroyed, He gave the promise that the kingdom can't be destroyed. And so the book of Revelation is going to be about this war. What does Satan do? What does Christ do? And what should we do in order to be victorious? Let's quickly look at the situation at that time. Now, again, this is something we hear about the Caesars and all of this, and it's kind of nothing to us. But it was a lot to them. It was a whole lot to them. You see, the Caesar. Now, let's not get carried away with Caesar being a great big term. Caesar is the last name of a guy, like Williams. So the Williamses. Let's do something a little bit better than that. Let's take Bushes. And so here it is, we had President Bush. Now then we've got another President Bush. Well, maybe his brother runs and got another President Bush. And then his son runs and we got another President Bush. And so in a little while, people will say, who's the Bush? Meaning, who's the president? They just become synonymous. Caesar. Who's the Caesar? Well, it started out with this guy by the name of Julius Caesar. That he finally, through conniving and so forth, became the first ruler of the Roman Empire. And since he was a Caesar, then all the other guys after him were also called Caesars. And so that is synonymous with dictator. It means emperor. It means the man that's in total control of the nation. So these Caesars that are here. Now, I want you to notice this. In Julius Caesar, this is 102, he started years before Christ, down to 44 years before Christ was born. This is when he ruled. Now, at that time, 44 years before Christ was born, he presented himself as a god, and upon his death, the Senate deified him as a god. Now, this has a big impact on our brethren back at that time. Because what would you think if President Bush tomorrow made the declaration that he wanted to be recognized as a god? And so he takes it to Congress, and both houses of Congress meet, and we watch it on TV, and they vote that beginning on this day, George Bush is divine. He is a god. See? And we now are to recognize him as a god and show him the loyalty as a god. Well, this was introduced here 44 years before Christ was born. So Christ was born into this atmosphere. Then he died, and Augustus took his place. Now, this is another guy, and so he took the name Augustus after he became a Caesar. After he became the king, the ruler, he said, now I want to be known as Augustus because Augustus means the great one. It means the supreme one, the best one. But I want you to notice down here, temples and altars were erected in his honor, and the concept of divinity, worship of Rome, and Augustus spread rapidly. After death, he is referred to as the divine Augustus. Romans were free to worship whatever god they chose, but worship of Rome and Augustus was a symbol of loyalty to the state. With him, the foundation of emperor worship as a state action was solidly laid. So now with this guy, they said, you can worship whatever god you want to worship. All I want you to do is recognize me as a god. And so the state then began to recognize its citizens on this basis. If you don't proclaim Augustus as a god and you don't worship him, you're not loyal to the state. Because loyalty to the state was proven by your worship that you gave to the Caesar. Then Tiberius comes along. All prayers were addressed to Tiberius. They, the senators, by the way, our government is based really upon the Roman government back there. So our senators, our rulers that we have here, they raised their hands to the gods, to the statue of Augustus, and to the knees of Tiberius. So now then we have the government, the senators ruling. Then we have Caligula comes along. He assumed the role of a god and insisted on being treated as a god. And it said, and sending for the most revered and artistically famous statues of the Greek deities, including that of Jupiter at Olympia, and having their hands replaced by his own, he took the god Jupiter, took off his hands, has his hands put on there, and then took off the head of these gods and put his head on there. So now then, he now has become, throughout statues, as the great god in here. So he now has become a god. Then Claudius comes along, and Claudius, he was a pretty good guy. He kind of reversed some things. Nero comes along. He's the craziest of all of them. He was insane. He just did so many things that don't even want to talk about it. But he enjoyed the popular sacrifice to his image and wanted people to think of him as a god. It is said that in the entry of his golden house stood a bronze statue of Nero as sun god, taller than the Statue of Liberty. So, you think he didn't think something of himself? Now, you say, how does this apply to us? This applies to our brethren back there. This applies to the Apostle Paul and all the Christians that were in the New Testament church. And it's the reason why it was necessary for the book of Revelation to be written, because a battle is getting ready to come forth from this. Now then, you have a bunch of bad ones. This guy took over, and he only lasted 6 months and got killed. Another guy took over, he lasted 95 days, and he committed suicide. Another guy took over, he lasted 11 months. So the kingdom is starting to get shaky that's in here. Vespasian came on, the guy that we've talked about before, and Titus. This is the guy that finally conquered Rome, and so forth. And then his brother Domitian came along. Now, it's during this time that the book of Revelation then was written. And the Caesar worship had been established in the whole kingdom. And the Caesars wanted Christians and everybody who was a Roman, everybody, to recognize the Caesar as a god. It was loyalty to the state. It's like we say, I pledge allegiance to the flag. I'm loyal to America. And somebody says, I will not say that. I will not pay my taxes. I will not. And so we start rebelling against the state, then they know they've got some troublemakers. Now, when Christians wouldn't worship these Caesars, Rome knew they had some troublemakers. They knew that they had some rebellious people, although they didn't. Paul said, obey Caesar, but the Caesars didn't look at it that way. Now, as you look at the message in the book of Revelation, the message is through visions and symbols. It's not just through the normal talk like Paul would do in other letters and discuss things. The reader is expected to interpret these signs to get the meaning of the message. It's like seeing a play. I think this is exactly what it's like. Now, as we read this, the book of Revelation, we're going to see that, first of all, in the first chapter, we're introduced to Jesus Christ. And there's going to be that grand, shining figure, awesome figure, standing among 7 candlesticks. And he's going to be doing and saying certain things. And John will interpret in this first chapter and show us these candlesticks represent the church. These candlesticks are 7 churches. These candlesticks will do this. And he's going to be talking about it. But here it is. It's through a vision that you see. So Jesus is introduced in all of his grandeur. His appearance is awesome, walking among them. He has died and is life forevermore. He's in control. So we learn this. Then the curtain goes up and the curtain comes back down. And the second scene of our play begins. Now the second scene is that all of a sudden they looked up and there were 7 books. Now out of these 7 books, these 7 letters, then he opened one letter and it said this. Opened another letter and it said that. And so then we'll have these 7 letters. The screen comes down, goes again in there, and finally it comes down again for the third scene. Now, this is totally different than anything else. In chapters 4 and 5, it's the throne scene. And it's going to describe God on his throne. It's going to describe him in such an awesome way that it's just awesome. But we're going to get the picture from man's viewpoint. And it's going to show us. The meaning is, God's on his throne. It says the heavens are pulled back. Now, if you could just pull back the heavens, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing right now? If all of a sudden we could just pull back the heavens to see what's going on over there. Is there really a God? Is he really in control? That's what this is going to do. It says the heavens opened John looked in, and then there is God on his throne. So that'll be the next scene that we run across then, that is in there. And then we'll have another one. Curtain goes up, curtain comes back down. And then we have the opening of the seven seals. As we have these opening of the seven seals, here comes a rider out on a certain color of a horse. Another rider out on another color. Another rider out on another color. And then we've got to say, what do these things mean? What are they trying to tell us in this war that is going on? So it gives an overview of the saints there that is in there. Then we open up another one then. Chapter 8 and 9, the seven trumpets. And you open that up, and then you begin to see this awesome vision of heaven and what is taking place here on earth, and that just an awesome thing. So it's going to be a series of scenes in a play. The screen goes up, the screen comes down. And what does it mean? And this will continue on through the first 11 chapters then of the book of Revelation. Now, as we look at it, in verses 1 through 3, we have here him saying the revelation or the apocalypse of Jesus Christ. We've already seen this before. The apocalypse means, it comes from a Greek word apo, which means from, and kalypto, which means cover. So it means taking the cover from. It means unveiling, showing what is going to happen. So that's what's going to show us. God's going to take the cover off of this, and He's going to show us in this great battle between the Roman government with all of its forces and the kingdom of God. He's going to show us what is really happening. Here is what is really happening, and here is who is going to win. So it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. That is, it is the revelation given by Him. Jesus Christ now is the one that is going to give us this revelation. Now, God gave this to Jesus to show to His saints, we find out. Then secondly, it pertains to things shortly to come to pass in verse 1. And then thirdly, Revelation is mostly about events and not Jesus. It's going to be telling us about events. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is about Jesus that's in there. Then it says, which God gave Him, that is, God gave Him the revelation to Jesus. This is nothing new. Jesus has always said, my teaching is not mine, but I say what my Father says, and so forth. That's in there. He said, concerning things which must shortly come to pass. Now, I want to emphasize that. He starts the book out by saying, we're going to talk about things which will shortly come to pass. Now, in your major way of people interpreting the book of Revelation today, that we've already talked about with the rapture and all of these things, they say the book of Revelation is about what's going to happen still in the future. Well, here it is, 2,000 years later, you see, it's going to happen here in the future. No, the book of Revelation says these things we're talking about is going to shortly come to pass, going to happen quickly here. Now, Vine describes shortly, he says it means quickly, swiftly. It's not going to be very long until it comes to pass. In Luke 18, the word is used, and He will bring about justice for them quickly. It means He's not going to wait for thousands of years. Paul says when he writes Timothy, I'm writing you these things to you, hoping to come to you before long. That's the Greek word, before long. I hope to come to you quickly. It won't be long. So now the events that's going to take place in the book of Revelation are events that's going to take place before very long. Not 2,000 years down the line, the way that we hear it talked about in here today. So now He sent and communicated it in here, and that word communicate in there is really sign. He gave a sign or a token. He talked in sign language. We find again in Revelation it's going to talk about in sign language. But He's going to talk about in sign. Now, in your English it said, and He signified these things. Signified means sign language. He's talking in signs. He's talking in these signs that I talked about a moment ago. Now He's going to do it by His angels to his bondservant. So here's the interesting thing. All of this message is coming to us in this way. It starts out from God. God gives it to his Son, Jesus. Jesus then transports it to an angel. The angel then gives it to John. John then gives it to other angels that are going to be angels of the church and in there. And then they write it down, and now then you and I have it. And so that's how the book of Revelation really came to us. Now, there's where we're going to stop tonight. And we'll just continue on, and next time start verse by verse by verse, going down, seeing what he had to say. Should you be here tonight and you need to be washed in the blood of Jesus Christ, would you respond while we stand?